The services come 2 weeks after his body was found in the water near a popular barrier island following a 4th of July boat trip.
This case needed more than tears. So before the service even ended, two of the most recognizable names attached to this story turned Nolan Wells' homegoing into something else entirely, a public challenge to whoever is still staying quiet. We're going to walk through exactly what happened at that funeral, what the family said, what new evidence has surfaced this week, and what officials at every level, from the sheriff's office all the way up to the governor and the FBI, are now saying about this case. Some of it lines up with what you already believe happened. Some of it might not. If you want every update on this case the moment it breaks, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you don't miss it. You already know the broad strokes. Horn Island, July 4th. The friends who came back without him. The 2 days it took to find his body. The contradictions Ben Crump has pointed to since day one. So we're not rewalking that ground. What matters right now is everything that's happened since, and especially what happened on the funeral. The funeral wasn't the first time people showed up publicly for Nolan Wells, but it was by far the biggest. Back on July 11th, more than 100 people rallied at the intersection of Government and State streets in Ocean Springs, holding signs and praying together, demanding transparency while the investigation was still in its early weeks. The Congressional Black Caucus later issued its own statement backing the family's call for a full and independent investigation. Today's crowd dwarfed that one. Center Point Church in Ocean Springs filled up fast this morning. Visitation ran from 9 to 11, and the service began right after, with Reverend Al Sharpton delivering the eulogy. Hundreds showed up, including nearly Nolan's entire high school football team, many of them dressed in black and blue, the colors of his team, at the family's specific request. Christine Wonsley, Nolan's mother, spoke first. She thanked God for the 18 years she and her husband Elmore got to raise him, and she talked about the kind of person he was, someone who made people feel seen and valued, who could lift somebody's confidence with a few words. She said he had a way of making people feel like they belonged. It wasn't just grief in her voice, it was pride. The family had already said this wouldn't be a service defined only by sorrow. Christine had told reporters days earlier that after the funeral, there would be a celebration at the Jackson County Fairgrounds for friends, family, and teammates, because, in her words, Nolan wouldn't want everyone sitting around crying. So today carried both halves at once, a homegoing and a call to action.
First, I want to give all thanks and honor and glory to God for choosing Elmore and me to be Nolan's parents. We thank you, Lord, for the beautiful 18 years that you blessed us with him. Thank you for the joy he brought not only to our family, but also to his friends and everyone in the community whose lives he touched. Nolan had such a gentle, calming spirit about him. He had a way of making people feel seen, welcome, and valued. He could lift your confidence with just a few words and make you feel like you belonged. If you ever had the privilege of meeting our son Nolan or calling him a friend, then you experienced a glimpse of God's love through him.
Midway through his eulogy, Sharpton stopped preaching and started negotiating, in a sense, with anyone in this country who might be holding back information. He said it plainly. You were not on that island by yourself. Somebody saw something and knows something. Then he offered $50,000, funded through his organization, the National Action Network, to anyone who comes forward with information that leads to an arrest and a conviction. Before the service wrapped, Sharpton told the crowd he'd just received a text from Tyler Perry. Perry was already paying for the funeral itself, but now he was matching Sharpton's reward, dollar for dollar. $50,000 became $100,000, announced live inside the church, while Nolan's parents sat feet away. It's worth being precise about what this reward is actually for. It's not a bounty on any specific person, nobody has been named a suspect. This is a reward for information aimed at anyone in that crowd of people who were on or around Horn Island that day, encouraging them to come forward with anything they might be sitting on. And there's already an appetite for it.
Before we do the prayer of committal and escort the family out, I just got a text, Christine and Elmer, you know that Tyler Perry said he would pay for the funeral. He must be watching, because he said, I'm going to match you and put up $50,000 more. So we putting up $100,000 for anybody that'll come forward. We just want the truth, that's all. We just want the truth.
The family says they've been fielding somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day since Wells's death, from people claiming they were on the island or knew someone who was. A formal reward, backed by two of the most recognizable names attached to this case, is designed to turn that flood of calls into something prosecutors can actually use. Sharpton also did something a lot of eulogies wouldn't. He told the room, directly, not to let opinions run ahead of the facts. He said it wasn't appropriate for either side, the family's side or the friend's side, to be declared right before investigators finish their work. But he followed that with a list of questions he said still needed answers. Why did Wells's phone and keys end up with his friends instead of with him? Why didn't anyone call police the moment they realized he was missing? And why local officials seemed, in his view, quick to rule out foul play before the investigation had gone very far. Ben Crump followed Sharpton at the pulpit. He led the crowd in a chant, Nolan's life mattered, and said the family is chasing, in his words, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Nolan's life matters. Nolan's life matters.
One thing worth clearing up, since it's easy to mix these two up, especially if you've seen both numbers floating around in comment sections. This new $100,000 from Sharpton and Perry is a reward for information tied specifically to an arrest and conviction. It's a separate figure from an earlier $100,000 donation media mogul Byron Allen made to the family's GoFundMe page weeks ago, which was financial support for the family during their grief, not a reward for evidence. Two different $100,000 figures, two completely different purposes, both genuinely part of this story. While the funeral was happening, it was happening against the backdrop of a timeline that's gotten far more detailed over just the past week, thanks to GPS records nobody expected to become public. Here's what the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources' own tracking data shows. The boat carrying Wells and his friends left a private dock on El Camino Real Road in Ocean Springs at around 9:56 in the morning. It reached Horn Island by 11:14. Wells was last seen there by his friends around 3 in the afternoon. Then it gets more complicated. According to the data, the boat left the island around 4:31 that afternoon without Wells. About 30 minutes after departure, near 4 p.m., someone aboard placed a distress call, not to police, but to a private towing company. The caller reported the boat was near the western tip of Horn Island and that its bilge pump had failed. His exact words, according to the recording obtained by NBC News, "We're at the west tip of Horn and our bilge pump stopped working. We're going. We're sinking. Can you all please come?" When the dispatcher asked if everyone aboard was safe, the caller said yes, everybody is on board, with 7 people accounted for. The boat was towed roughly 3 miles and made it back to its original departure point by 5:44 that evening. That detail alone has fueled plenty of public speculation, since the same window that could have been spent alerting authorities that a friend was left behind was instead spent on a call about a malfunctioning bilge pump. To be fair to the full picture, authorities have confirmed Wells was not on that boat at the time of the call, and the timeline doesn't establish what he was doing during that window either. There's more to the GPS data beyond that first return trip. Records show the same vessel made 2 additional short trips later that evening, one to Fort Bayou around 5:52 and another to a local boat launch near 7:19. Investigators haven't publicly explained the purpose of those later trips, and Crump's team has said they want to know who authorized them. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath has said all of this eventually funnels into one destination, a grand jury. Once the sheriff's office finishes its investigation, her office will present the full case, including this timeline, to a grand jury. Her office and Sharpton both stressed the same point during their public remarks this week. Convening a grand jury is standard procedure for any unnatural or suspicious death in Jackson County. It isn't by itself a sign that anyone is being charged with anything. If there's one detail from this case that keeps circling back into every new headline, it's Nolan's phone. Attorney Ben Crump has repeatedly called it bizarre for a teenager to be separated from his phone at all, especially for 2 full days. New reporting fills in exactly how that phone made it back to the family. Christine Wonsley tracked her son's phone in real time using Life 360, a family location-sharing app, and traced it to the home of one of Wells's friends. She sent a friend, referred to in reporting only as Hands, to retrieve it. According to that account, the group at the house was watching television with the lights off when Hands arrived, and Wells's friends reportedly hesitated to hand the phone over. It wasn't until one of the friend's mothers spoke with Christine directly, over speakerphone, that the phone was released. One of the young men in the house, identified in reporting as Wyatt, said the phone was actually out in his truck, and that a young woman at the house went to retrieve it. The whole exchange reportedly took about 15 minutes. Christine has said there was nothing unusual in her son's own Snapchat history from that day. Meanwhile, defenders of the friends have pushed back on the idea that any of this points to wrongdoing. One friend's uncle told reporters that leaving a phone behind on a boat is common among teenagers, and that Wells's phone had simply been sitting on the dashboard along with roughly 15 other phones belonging to everyone else on the trip that day. Both of those things can be true at once. It can be ordinary for a group of teenagers to leave their phones piled on a dashboard, and it can also be the detail a grieving mother can't stop turning over in her mind. That tension between an innocent explanation and a mother's instinct that something is wrong is sitting at the center of almost every unresolved question in this case. For nearly 2 weeks after Wells's body was found, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves said nothing publicly about the case. That changed on July 16th, when he addressed it directly during a press conference. Reeves said the state's Department of Public Safety Commissioner, Sean Tyndall, had been in contact with those involved, and confirmed the autopsy was being handled by the state medical examiner's office within that same department. He said he personally knows Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter, though he hadn't spoken with him directly about this specific case, and that he has full confidence Ledbetter will do his job. Then came the part of his statement that's been quoted the most since. Reeves said he doesn't know every detail or every fact surrounding the case, and that he has yet to see a fact or piece of evidence suggesting foul play. But he added that if such evidence exists, he's confident the sheriff's office, the district attorney, and the Department of Public Safety will find it and act on it. That statement didn't fully satisfy either side of the public conversation around this case. Some read it as measured and appropriately cautious for a governor speaking about an open investigation. Others felt it came too late and leaned too heavily toward reassurance rather than urgency. Either way, it was the first time the state's top elected official weighed in, nearly 2 weeks after this story had already become national news. The FBI's role in this case has actually expanded in 2 different directions, and it's important to separate them clearly. First, on the investigation itself, Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has confirmed the FBI is assisting his office, specifically helping review digital evidence connected to the case. In a statement to WLBT, the FBI's Jackson field office said it will remain ready to assist local investigators as requested, particularly where federal resources might help bring clarity and, in their words, peace of mind to Nolan's loved ones. Second, and separately, the FBI confirmed to ABC News that it is working to address interstate threats received by individuals connected to this case. The agency didn't specify who received those threats, but several people involved have said publicly that they've been targeted. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, whose son Warren Hudson was on the island with Wells that day, has said her family has received death threats. Another friend of Wells, Tristan Shepard, has said he and several others who were on Horn Island that day have also been threatened. Christine Wonsley herself has said she's been receiving hate mail since her son's death became national news. So, you have federal law enforcement doing two things at once here: assisting a local homicide-adjacent death investigation on one hand, and separately investigating threats made against people connected to that same investigation on the other. Both are active right now. Neither one has produced a public conclusion yet. It's a strange, uncomfortable dual role for one single agency to hold in a case like this one, protecting the very people who might eventually face more scrutiny while also helping scrutinize them at the same time. There's one more wrinkle in that GPS timeline worth sitting with, because it's the piece the case seems to keep circling back to. Wells was last seen on the island around 3 in the afternoon. The GPS records show the boat didn't actually leave until 4:31. That's roughly 90 minutes between the last confirmed sighting of Wells and his friend's departure, a window investigators haven't publicly characterized in any specific way and haven't released findings explaining what happened during it. Local residents in Ocean Springs have said this case dominates conversation across the community precisely because of details like this. Every new piece of data seems to confirm part of the official story while leaving another part of it unexplained. Online commentary picked up on this same gap almost immediately after the GPS records went public. One social media commentator who's been closely tracking the case pointed out that the data technically supports the group's version of events, that the boat really did leave around 4:30, but argued it raises just as many questions as it answers. The exact wording that circulated was blunt. This verifies the departure story, but raises even more questions. What happened during that missing hour and a half? When did they even notice they had Nolan's phone? Investigators haven't publicly responded to that framing, and they haven't characterized that period as missing time in any official capacity. But the question itself hasn't gone away, just because nobody in an official role has answered it. Judge Ashley Cole, whose son Warren Hudson was among the friends on the island that day, has publicly defended her son's account of events. In a Facebook post, she said Wells was last seen around 3, that the boat left around 4:30, and that the delay was due to the boat's malfunction, not anything more troubling. Her account lines up with the GPS and distress call data that's since become public. What it doesn't do is explain why nobody called authorities during that window to report a friend left behind, rather than calling a private towing company about a broken bilge pump. That's the gap this case keeps living inside. Not evidence of a crime, not proof of an accident, just an unexplained 90 minutes that both sides have their own way of accounting for, and that investigators have yet to publicly resolve. For balance, it's worth spending a moment on the explanation officials have leaned toward publicly so far, because it's easy to lose sight of it in the middle of everything else. The Jackson County coroner completed the physical examination of Wells's body and reported no preliminary indications of foul play, with the full picture still waiting on toxicology. Sheriff Ledbetter has said his working theory is drowning. Horn Island itself has a reputation locals know well, and outsiders often don't. People who visit it regularly describe currents and water conditions that can shift without warning, turning a calm afternoon swim dangerous within minutes. It's part of why the island, for all its popularity as a holiday destination, carries what longtime visitors call an unspoken danger. None of that erases the unanswered questions around the phone, the 90-minute gap, or the contradictory accounts from that afternoon. But it's the piece of context that explains why officials have stayed cautious about jumping to any conclusion beyond a tragic accident, at least based on everything they've said publicly so far. Most of the public narrative around this case has come from Wells's family and their legal team, but at least one of his friends has spoken at length, and it's worth including his account directly, since he's the person closest to Wells who was actually there. Tristan Shepard, who's described himself as one of Wells's closest friends, appeared on Good Morning America with his voice altered and his face kept off camera, citing the same kind of threats mentioned above. His message was direct. "We did no wrong here," he said, "and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate." He said everyone in that friend group loved Nolan and that nobody wanted to see anything happen to him. Shepard has said repeatedly that he wants the investigation to run its course before anyone draws conclusions, adding that if the facts show someone harmed Nolan, he hopes justice follows. And if it was a tragic accident that someone failed to speak up about, he hopes justice follows just the same. There's still one contradiction sitting at the center of Shepard's account and everyone else's that hasn't been resolved. Crump has said a young woman Wells was talking to on the island told investigators he said he planned to get back on the boat with his friends. The friends, including Shepard, have said Wells told them the opposite, that he was staying behind specifically to talk with her. Two people describing the same conversation in two different directions. Nobody has explained that gap yet, and it's the detail Crump keeps coming back to every time he's asked what still troubles him about this case. It's worth noting that some claims have circulated online well beyond what Shepard or any official source has confirmed, including theories suggesting Wells's body was moved or staged after some kind of altercation at a private residence. None of that has been substantiated by investigators, the family's legal team, or any of the reporting that's actually verified information. In this case, and it should be treated as unconfirmed online speculation rather than fact. Pulling all of this together, here's the actual state of the investigation as of today. Both autopsies, the one conducted by the state medical examiner and the independent one ordered by Crump's team and funded by Colin Kaepernick, remain pending. Toxicology results are part of what's holding up the state's report. Once the sheriff's office finishes its work, the district attorney has said the entire case goes to a grand jury, standard procedure for a death like this in Jackson County, regardless of what that grand jury ultimately decides. Crump has also said Wells' phone will undergo what's being called a mutual inspection, meaning experts representing both the family and the district attorney's office will examine it together, rather than either side working from it alone. The FBI is assisting with digital evidence and separately investigating threats made against people tied to the case. The governor has weighed in publicly, saying he's seen no evidence of foul play so far, but trusts local and state officials to act on it if it exists. New GPS records have filled in the boat's exact movements that day, including a still unexplained pair of additional trips later that evening. And a $100,000 reward is now sitting on the table for anyone who can bring investigators the piece of information that's been missing this entire time. What hasn't changed is the core mystery. Why did an 18-year-old, who, by every account, always stuck with his group, end up alone on an island his friends left without him? Why did his phone travel home without him, sitting on a dashboard for 2 full days before his mother tracked it down herself? Why did a boat full of teenagers call a towing company before anyone called the sheriff? And why, even with GPS data, distress calls, 60 witness interviews, and a small army of investigators now involved, from the local sheriff up through the FBI, does nobody seem able to answer the one question his parents have been asking since the night he didn't come home? That's the loop this case keeps closing, without ever actually closing. Every new piece of evidence answers a smaller question and opens up a bigger one, and today's funeral made that louder than ever. If you want to be here for whatever comes out of that grand jury process, or whenever the very next piece of evidence surfaces in this case, subscribing means you won't have to go looking for it yourself. It'll just be here waiting for you the moment it drops.